Hi guys, this is Mrs. Pickard. Before you watch the rest of this video, please make sure that you have already printed out text 1. This is called Ghosts of August. Please make sure that you have already printed this out. You are going to need to write on this document and submit your annotations as a grade. So if you have not printed this out, please stop. Make sure that you do so before you continue watching. Thank you. Hi guys, this is Mrs. Pickard. We are going to go ahead and work on our first text, which is called Ghosts of August by Gabriel, Garcia, Marquez. Before we do that, we do need to go over our standard and learning target, so please write this on your paper as I go along. So our first standard is RL 1.1, and it says cite the textual evidence that most strongly supports an analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. Our learning target is draw conclusions based on analysis of textual details and patterns. What's nice about these videos is that if you don't get the information in time, you can definitely hit pause and come back. And our task that we're going to work on today is we are going to annotate Ghosts of August by Gabriel Garcia Marquez with me based on our standard and learning target. Go ahead and pause if you're not done writing. We're going to move on to the terms. Terms that we need to know before moving into this text. Inferences, implicit, explicit, patterns. So, an inference is when I make an assumption about the story or characters based on evidence. So an inference isn't just a guess. An inference does have some sort of evidence that made you have that assumption in the first place. For example, our title is Ghosts of August. So if you were to infer that this story may deal with ghosts, your evidence would be that ghosts are in the title. Implicit is when an author implies something about a character or the story. Implicit information is always implied, and we're also going to include here for our notes that it is not obvious. we have to dig a little deeper for implicit information. This should be a quick review. You should have already learned this information in 6th and 7th grade, but we do need a refresher moving forward. Explicit information is when an author tells us something about a character or the story. And this one is obvious. We don't really have to dig deeper with explicit information. We are told exactly the fact, the information. And then patterns, we're just looking for repeated styles made by the author. So a lot of authors have their own unique styles, or they may be using something specific to enhance their writing, a pattern like cause and effect, or like the one that we're going to talk about in this story today that's a little different. What I want you to go ahead and do is make a prediction about what you think this story is going to be about just by the title, Ghosts of August. So go ahead and write your prediction right here. You can pause the video until you are done writing your prediction. We are going to go ahead and start reading on the next page. Ghosts of August by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Before we start reading, we do need to make an annotation key at the top of our paper. So, since we're looking for inferences, implicit information, explicit information, and patterns, that's what's going to be included in our key. So I'm going to do a star for any time that I have an inference. And I'm going to need 2 highlighters for explicit and implicit information. You don't have to use the same colors as me. If you don't have highlighters, you can use colored pencils or underline with a marker, whatever you have to distinguish between explicit information and implicit information. And then I'm also going to make a note in the corner that we are looking for patterns. We got to Arezzo a little before midday, and we wasted more than 2 hours looking for the Renaissance castle that Miguel Otero Silva, a Venezuelan writer, had bought in the idyllic bends of the Tuscan countryside. Real quick, I'm going to make a note that Arezzo is in Italy. And so far, our narrator is trying to find a castle that a famous Venezuelan writer bought in the Tuscan countryside in Italy. It was a Sunday in early August, burning and bustling. With the streets filled with tourists, it was almost impossible to find someone who knew their way around. After many fruitless attempts, we returned to the automobile and left the city on a path lined with lifeless cypress. An old woman watching the geese told us exactly where the castle was. Before leaving, she asked if we planned to sleep there, so we answered that we were only going for lunch as we had planned. I want you to go ahead and make an inference about the old woman over here. Make an inference about the old woman by the explicit information that she's watching the geese. What could that tell us about her? Just write your inference right here. Thank goodness, she said, because that house is haunted. All right, I'm going to make an inference here based on our title that we are going to get a ghost story about a haunted house. My wife and I did not believe in midday ghosts, so we made fun of her gullibility. Again, this is another detail about the old woman that could have you revise the inference that you made at the top, or maybe continue it. I'm gonna say that this narrator seems to look down on the woman. Like he doesn't trust her, right? He's making fun of her. He doesn't trust her advice. So we made fun of her gullibility, but our two sons, 9 and 7 years old, were thrilled by the idea of meeting a ghost in the flesh. That's called irony, because ghosts cannot be in the flesh. In addition to being a good writer, Miguel Otero Silva was a splendid host and had a sophisticated palate. He had prepared an unforgettable lunch for us. Because it had gotten quite late, we did not have time to see the inside of the castle before sitting down at the table, but from the outside it looked harmless. Any concern we may have had was erased by the incredible view of the city from the flowered terrace where we ate. It was hard to believe that on that hill of teetering houses, where not even 90,000 people could fit, so many men of everlasting genius had been born. Nonetheless, Miguel Otero Silva told us, with his Caribbean humor, that none of them was the most distinguished in Arezzo. Alright, so I'm going to say it seems pretty obvious that they found the castle they were looking for. So the old woman told them where the castle was, and they found it. And we know that from the explicit information. He had prepared an unforgettable lunch for us, right? Because this Miguel Otero Silva, that's the owner of the house, the Venezuelan writer. The castle, I should say, not the house. And we also know that they seem to feel at ease or calm. They don't really seem worried about what the old woman told them, that the place was going to be haunted, right? He says the outside looked harmless. He also says any concern we may have had was erased by the view. Also, with us saying that he feels at ease or calm, we can almost even make an inference that they're having a good time, because he says the implicit information with his Caribbean humor. That could lead us to think that they are having a good time. They're just having a meal with this guy, invited into the castle, being told funny stories, and they don't seem worried about anything peculiar. So he was just talking about distinguished homes or brilliant people, geniuses in this area, kind of like wining and dining these people and talking about everybody who is like a celebrity of the time. He says the greatest, he proclaimed, was Ludovico. Just like that, without a last name. Ludovico, the greatest man of art and war, who had built that castle of misfortune. I'm going to go ahead and make an inference when it says, just like that, without a last name. To me, that implies, that implies that Ludovico is famous and that Miguel, so remember that Miguel is the owner of the house. So it implies that Ludovico is famous and that Miguel knows him on a first name basis. If it skipped ahead a little bit, that's just because my iPad fell and I had to reset it up. No worries there. But again, when he says the greatest he proclaimed was Ludovico, just like that, without a last name. A lot of famous people go by just one name, right? Miguel spoke of him throughout lunch. He told us of his immense power, his ill-fated love, and his horrifying death. He told us how, in an instant of passionate fervor, he had stabbed his lover in the bed while she slept. Then, he set his ferocious war dogs on himself and was torn to shreds. Well, that escalated quickly, huh? So right now, as a reader, I kind of have this look on my face like, okay, that escalated. And I have an inference saying, could Ludovico be the ghost that the old lady warned us about? The author's giving us this explicit information about Ludovico, saying he stabbed his lover, he set the ferocious war dogs on himself and was torn to shreds, right? At the same time that that information is explicit, we can also say that it is implying that he could be the ghost, right? So implies he could be the ghost. That's why we have that information. Explicitly, if you wanted to make a note for explicitly, we know he's dead, right? If he set ferocious war dogs on himself and was torn to shreds, we know that he did not survive that. He assured us solemnly that at the stroke of midnight, the spirit of Ludovico wandered through the house in darkness, trying to find peace in the purgatory of love. All right, so I feel like that just supported our inference, right? We made the inference that we thought that Ludovico was the ghost. Now we have this explicit information that at midnight, the spirit of Ludovico wandered through the house in darkness. This is a typo, should say spirit. It says sprit. So again, this has confirmed that Ludovico is the ghost that the old lady warned us about. I want you guys to try to come up with an inference for this part right here. Okay, so when you turn this in, when you turn in your annotations, there's going to be some things that I'm looking for that you did on your own, right? First of all, I'm looking to make sure that you have kept up with what we're doing together, but I also want to see that you've made some connections on your own. So based on this implicit information that says trying to find peace in the purgatory of love, I will tell you that purgatory is kind of like hell. So trying to find peace in the purgatory of love, what do you think that means? Make an inference right here. What is that saying about the ghost of Ludovico? All right, now that you've made your inference, and if you haven't, remember you can pause at any time. Let's continue reading. The castle, in reality, was immense and dark. But in broad daylight, with a full stomach and happy heart, Miguel's tale just sounded like one of the many jokes he tells to entertain guests. Alright, I'm starting to notice a pattern here. The pattern that I'm starting to notice is that this author tends to go from like story back into reality, and almost like tense and scary, suspenseful, and then back into calm and at ease. So I'm just going to note that pattern to the side. I'm going to put a P and say that this seems like story time, right? You could even say spooky story time because it's about the ghost. And then here seems like we're back to reality, where he's eating with the host, and it feels more like present time, right? And again, he's telling us that Miguel's tale just sounded like one of the many jokes he tells to entertain guests. That would be our evidence to support this pattern, and about how it feels again like they're just laughing, having a good time, talking about a creepy ghost, and also not really taking it seriously. The 82 rooms we walked through without awe after the siesta had suffered through all kinds of adjustments, owner after owner. Miguel had completely restored the first floor. He had constructed a modern bedroom. With marble floors, a sauna, a fitness center, and a terrace, covered in flourishing flowers where we had eaten. The second floor had been used the most over the course of the centuries and was composed of a series of characterless rooms. The furniture from different time periods was left to its own devices. But the last door opened an intact room. Okay, before we go into that sentence, this idea about the furniture and how everything has changed and run its course. This is an old castle, remember? The furniture from different time periods was left to its own devices. That's implicitly telling us that it is old, not in good condition. Left to its own devices, different time periods, kind of tattered, run down. But the last door opened to an intact room. Remember, intact means together, not falling apart. Perfectly preserved, as if time had simply forgotten to pass there. It was Ludovico's room. Alright, right now as a reader, I'm thinking as if time forgot to pass there. If everything else in this house is looking old and not in good shape, and one room looks perfectly preserved and intact, I'm thinking, something seems kind of weird here, right? I'm thinking that I know this was called Ghosts of August, and something just doesn't seem right. And then when I see the explicit information, it was Ludovico's room, I'm thinking, uh-oh, the old lady warned us about him. So again, explicitly the author's telling us that it was Ludovico's room. Implicitly, he's implying that something is off about this room, and that it looks as though nothing has touched that room in years. It was a magical moment. Right in front of us was the bed with a gold-embroidered canopy and tasseled bedspread still stiff with the dried blood of the sacrificed lover. Ew. There was the hearth with solid cinders, the last log turned to stone, the well-polished dresser, and an old portrait of a pensive nobleman in a gold frame. Pensive just means that they're in thought, Maybe like someone who's very wise, thinking. An oil portrait of a pensive nobleman in a gold frame, painted by one of the Florentine masters who did not outlast his time. Nonetheless, what stunned me the most was the scent of fresh strawberries that seemed to be encapsulated within the bedroom without possible explanation. Okay, so he's entered this room, and he says that there's dried blood on the bed, and now he smells fresh strawberries. Explicitly, he smells fresh strawberries. Implicitly, he's telling us that that smell has no possible explanation, right? We also know that he said that there was dried blood in the room. Stiff with dried blood. I'm going to make an inference to the side, and I'm going to say that this doesn't really seem like reality anymore. This doesn't really seem like reality anymore. Seems more spooky, suspenseful, fantasy. And again, we could support that with the implicit information without any possible explanation, or when he said, as if time had simply forgotten to pass there. That could be our implicit evidence to support the inference. It doesn't seem like reality anymore. Summer days are long and slow in Tuscany, and the sun does not set until 9 at night. When we finished our tour of the castle, it was after 5, but Miguel insisted on taking us to see the frescoes of Piero della Francesca in the San Francisco church. So frescoes are paintings. Again, it kind of feels like we're shifting back and forth. We just said that it doesn't seem like reality, but now it feels like we're back to present time, right? He says summer days are long and slow. Miguel insisted on taking us to go see these paintings. There we stopped for coffee, chatting in the gazebo in the town square. When we returned to get our bags, dinner had just been served, so we stayed to eat. Again, I'm going to say that it feels like we are back in the present or reality. And I'm going to use the explicit evidence to support that with him saying it was after 5, but Miguel insisted on taking us to see the frescoes. We stopped for coffee, chatting in the gazebo. That's all explicit information. It's obvious. We're not really having to dig deeper in that. It's not really implying anything to us. As we ate under a mauve sky with one solitary star, the children lit a few torches in the kitchen and went to explore the darkness upstairs. Right now I'm thinking about scary movies, and I'm just thinking about don't do it, don't go upstairs, don't go to the basement, just don't do it. Don't do it. If you didn't know the word mauve, it's kind of like a purple color, like a mix of purple, red, pink. From the table, we heard their wandering gallops by the stairs, the groans of the doors, their happy cries calling to Ludovico in the sinister rooms. It was their bad idea to stay the night. Miguel Otero Silva delightedly encouraged them, and we did not have the heart to say no. So again, right now, I'm thinking that it seems a little bit more suspenseful. I'm going to say that the suspense feels like it's building. And I'm going to use Explicit Information, their happy cries calling to Ludovico in the sinister rooms. Now, because we have happy and sinister, again, it kind of feels like our narrator's joking around, like he's not taking it seriously. It almost makes me think of the Bloody Mary, right? Bloody Mary. And how there's that myth that, little kids going into a bathroom, turning out the light, saying Bloody Mary. That's what it kind of feels like, almost like a little game that the kids are playing right now. But again, with the idea sinister, I'm also thinking in the back of my mind, the warning from the old lady. Warning from the old woman. Those are the things I'm thinking of as I'm reading this. Contrary to my fears, we slept very well. My wife and I stayed in a bedroom on the first floor, and my sons on the fourth floor in adjoining rooms. Both rooms had been modernized, and neither looked at all sinister. Again, he seems calm, okay, at ease. He's staying the night and he doesn't seem afraid at all. And we have the explicit information of where they were staying. The first floor, the sons on the fourth, the rooms are adjoining. Again, our narrator doesn't really seem worried at all. As I waited for slumber, I counted the 12 reverberating strokes of the pendulum clock in the room, and I remembered the eerie warning of the old woman who watched the geese. Again, I'm thinking with an inference that it's about to be ghost time, because he's using words like eerie, right? And even the image of a pendulum clock, which is the kind that like swings back and forth, that's kind of spooky too, right? That image. And I'm going to note again that we have a pattern in the shift in tone and language. You could also think of this as connotation, right? We start hearing more negative words like eerie and warning. But we were so tired that we fell asleep very quickly, into a dense and uninterrupted slumber. I awoke after 7 a.m. with the splendid sun shining between the vines that covered my window. Again, now he feels at ease or happy, and we have the word splendid sun shining, right? So we went from having suspense to you're okay again? We keep doing this back and forth, back and forth. I awoke after 7 a.m. with the splendid sun shining between the vines that covered the window. At my side, my wife sailed, sleeping in the peaceful sea of the innocents. What foolishness, I thought to myself, that someone would still believe in ghosts nowadays. Just then, the smell of fresh-cut strawberries made me tremble. I saw the hearth with solid cinders, the last log turned to stone, and the portrait of the sad nobleman who watched us from 3 centuries ago from a gold frame. We were not in the first-floor bedroom where we had gone to bed the night before. Instead, we were in Ludovico's bedroom, under the intricate molding, dusty curtains, and sheets soaked with the still warm blood of his cursed bed. All right, there's a lot to break down here. Again, we have the smell of the fresh cut strawberries. We have the explicit information that they were not in the first floor bedroom where they had gone to bed the night before. And then we have the sheets soaked with blood. The sheets soaked with blood we're actually going to highlight as both colors. And I'm going to go through that in just a second. So again, Ludovico is the ghost, and somehow they've been transported into the ghost's bedroom. They're not in the first floor bedroom where they went to sleep the night before. We have this image of the blood being warm, and that leads us to an inference. I want you to think about what that inference is and go ahead and write it. My inference about this warm blood is that it is not Ludovico's lover's blood. Because remember, in the first page, when we learned that this story of how Ludovico died, that he had killed his lover while she slept, and then he sent the dogs to tear him to shreds. So in my brain, if this blood is warm, that happened years and years ago. I'm not thinking that it's his lover's blood. Instead, if you haven't caught on by now, it is our narrator's wife's blood. We're going to talk a little bit about the patterns, and I want you to write this on your paper as well. So the main pattern that we noticed is that the author shifts between moments of calmness and reality, in which the narrator seems at ease or even enjoying himself, so he shifts between moments of calmness and reality in which he's at ease or enjoying himself to moments of suspense and fantasy in which he seems nervous or worried. Another pattern that we noticed is that it seems like he uses specific, explicit language during the moments of reality. And it seems like he uses more implicit or even vague language when dealing with the fantasy side or the spooky side. All right, I have a couple questions that I want you to answer on your paper, and then we will be done for today. I want you to answer, what impact does this have on the reader? This pattern and these constant shifts, what impact does that have on the reader? You don't have to write the question. If you did, that's okay, but you do need to respond to the question in a complete sentence. So say something like, the patterns impact the reader by. And then the other question that I want you to answer is, why would Gabriel Garcia Marquez, our author, use this pattern? Why would he use this pattern? I want you to answer those two questions. If you have room on this paper, if you need to do it on another paper, that's okay too. But you are going to submit your annotations. So please make sure that you have answered these questions and that you have given inferences of your own when I've asked for them throughout our annotations. All right, have a good day, guys. Bye.